Hello and welcome to Pitboards and Podiums with me, Maya Westwick. In today's episode we are going to be talking about a legend of Formula 1, that is Michael Schumacher, so buckle up, let's get into it. So for those of you who are not too familiar with Michael Schumacher, maybe you didn't watch Formula 1 when he was in Formula 1, maybe you're new to the sport, anything like that, that's okay, there's no judgment, that's what this podcast is for. Michael Schumacher is one of the greatest Formula 1 drivers of all time. He is a 7-time world champion. He's incredibly respected in the sport. There's also been a lot of controversy around him as well, but he is incredibly respected within motorsports in general. And today, actually, the day that this podcast episode is going out is the 3rd of January 2024. Today is Michael Schumacher's 55th birthday. He was born on the 3rd of January 1969. And it's also my birthday, so happy birthday to both of us, Capricorn legends. So Michael Schumacher was born near Cologne in Germany, and he is the older brother to Ralf Schumacher, who was also a Formula 1 driver. Michael Schumacher, from a very young age, kind of displayed how incredibly talented he was, and he won his first karting championship at the age of 6, and that was in a kart that was put together basically by his dad. It wasn't anything fancy, anything special. It was something that really showcased his talents as a driver and also his dad's talents like as a mechanic, and then that enabled his parents to secure sponsorships and funding to help basically fund his progression through motorsports, because as we're probably all aware, motorsports is an industry that can be incredibly difficult to break into if you do not have a large amount of money, which the Schumachers did not. By 1987, so when he was 18, he was both a German and European karting champion, and then he left school and went to work as an apprentice car mechanic alongside his racing. He won the 1990 German F3 series and then was hired by Mercedes to drive their sports cars. Mercedes at this point was not involved in Formula 1, but of course they are huge just in the car industry. And then in 1991, Michael Schumacher made his debut in Formula 1, qualifying in P7 for the Belgian Grand Prix with Jordan. This was a one-off race. He was replacing Bertrand Gachot, who was in prison for aggravated assault. He was the Formula 1 driver that was driving for Jordan, whose car obviously Schumacher was driving in that race. He actually retired on the first lap of that Grand Prix, of his first Grand Prix, with clutch issues, but he was immediately snapped up by the Formula 1 team Benetton for the rest of the 1991 season. So then he replaced Roberto Moreno and partnered 3-time world champion Nelson Piquet. In 1992, he then won his first Formula 1 race back at Spa, and that was with Benetton. And then he actually, in 1994 and 1995, won his first 2 World Drivers' Championships with Benetton, which of course is an incredible feat. Over the course of the 1992 to 1995 seasons with Benetton, he won another 18 races. Bearing in mind, at that time in Formula 1, the seasons were nowhere near as long as they are now. It was not a case of there being 20 races a year, so winning 18 over 3 or 4 years it's a huge amount of races to have won. It's a huge percentage of races to have won. But despite all of his talent and all of his obvious skill and how good he was as a driver, controversy still kind of followed him around because he could be a little bit aggressive on track. He could make decisions that potentially weren't the best. 1994 in particular was quite controversial because, for a couple of reasons, Benetton as a team was suspected of having technical irregularities, so it was suspected that Benetton perhaps weren't playing by the rules necessarily. And also from a driving point of view, in the championship decider race in Adelaide, Schumacher collided with his closest challenger Damon Hill, who was driving for Williams, and that is basically how he secured that victory, because Hill was the person that would have stopped him becoming world champion that year, and by taking him out of the race he couldn't stop him becoming world champion. So it was a little bit controversial. There's no point in glossing over that, but he still was an incredible driver, as we have seen over decades of Formula 1. In the August of 1995, he then married his wife Corinna. They have notoriously had a very private personal life for the entirety of their relationship, and that is something that I have so much respect for. We really don't need to know any of their personal information. And then in 1996, he moved from Benetton to Ferrari, and Ferrari at the time was struggling quite a bit, and he did help develop the team a lot. When he moved to them, Ferrari was not a team that was doing well. It was not a team that was really challenging for anything, and he went not only in the capacity of an incredible racing driver, but he went in the capacity of someone who understands cars and understands how to build team morale, and he influenced all of those aspects to help create the legacy that he ended up building with Ferrari, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. In February 1997, Corinna then had their first child. That was his daughter, Gina Maria, and he did, unfortunately, 2 years in a row for 1997 and 1998, lose out on the title in the final race of each of those seasons. So the 1997 one was another controversial one, similar to 1994, only this time it didn't work in his favour. Basically, they went into the last race at Jerez, which was the European Grand Prix. He went into that 1 point ahead of Jacques Villeneuve, and they then collided while they were battling for the lead of that race, and Schumacher was forced to retire because there was too much damage. Villeneuve was able to go and carry on and finish the race. He went on to finish P3, which was enough to win the championship, and of course that meant that he'd already won the championship. Schumacher on points hadn't won it. He was on points in P2. The blame for the incident that caused Schumacher's retirement was attributed to Schumacher by the FIA afterwards, who then stripped him of his P2 in the championship as a form of punishment for that, because they believed that it was quite dirty driving. And there was quite a bit of controversy surrounding him and that incident in the media for quite a while after that as well. He then had his son Mick Schumacher, who is also a Formula One driver, in March of 1999, and they as a family lived in Switzerland and had a beautiful time raising their family and having their own private life in Switzerland, away from all of the busyness and scrutiny of like that celebrity lifestyle. So also at this point, of course, he is still with Ferrari, building up that team. He's been with them now for 4 years. He's had 4 seasons now with Ferrari without winning a championship, although he has, of course, come close. And then from 2000 to 2004, he won 5 more consecutive championships with Ferrari, statistically becoming the greatest Formula One driver of all time, because we have never had more than a 5-time world champion, and he became a 7-time world champion, winning 5 in a row. He then finished 3rd in the championship in 2005 and 2nd in the championship in 2006 before retiring from Formula One. And then he made a brief return to Formula One with Mercedes from 2010 to 2012, which was when they made their return as a constructors team to the sport for the first time since 1955. Of course, I did mention Mercedes earlier on. He'd basically had it written into his contract in the 90s, because of this work that he did with Mercedes, that if they were to return to the sport, he could go and race for them. So it was written in his contract that no matter what team he was with, once Mercedes was back in Formula One, he would be a Mercedes driver. During this retirement period between Ferrari and Mercedes, so like between 2007 and 2010, he worked as an advisor to Ferrari and as Jean Tot's super assistant. Jean Tot being very influential in Ferrari, being someone who worked closely alongside Michael Schumacher in building up Ferrari. He is a whole F1 figure in his own right that I can go into at another time. And he helped with Ferrari's development programme. He also competed in the IDM Superbike motorcycle racing series for a little bit as well. Just, loving life. The man loves sports. But of course, after the 2012 series of Formula One with Mercedes, he then retired for the 2nd time. Unfortunately, Michael Schumacher is not someone who is able to really be around Formula One anymore. He's not someone who, like previous GOATs in Formula One, can still be around the paddock and can be involved in other ways, because he did have quite a severe accident. In December 2013, on the 29th of December, he was skiing with Mick in the French Alps, and he fell and hit his head on a rock. And even through his ski helmet, he sustained such a serious head injury that he had to be put into a medically induced coma due to traumatic brain injury. He was gradually withdrawn from that coma in April of 2014, so he was in there for a good few months. We don't really know anything about him or his condition. He's not been seen in public since. The family keeps it very private, as is their right. We've had like dribs and drabs of information, just basically because, of course, he was so loved by so many people that people, of course, worry about him. He was transferred to a different hospital. Because he was in the French Alps when it happened, so he was in a French hospital. He was then transferred to a hospital in Switzerland, because he lived in Switzerland, in June of 2014, and then finally discharged back to his home for further rehabilitation in September 2014. But the few reports that we've had since then are that he's paralysed, he struggles to communicate, but there's always kind of a mention of him making progress and him making good progress. But obviously, in terms of the Michael Schumacher that the public knew, it's not really looking like that is ever going to be back. But that's a completely private matter for the family. That's something that it impacts them far more than it will ever impact any of us. And it's something that they've all had to adapt to and that they've all been very protective of. Jean Todt, as I mentioned earlier, he was a very influential figure in terms of Ferrari, and he was very influential in Formula One. And in terms of the friendship that he had with Michael Schumacher, he has confirmed that Michael is able to watch Formula One races, which is nice, because if he's able to watch them from home, that means, of course, he was able to see his son Mick while he was racing in Formula One, and hopefully Mick will make a return to Formula One, because he's no longer a first or second driver in the sport. He's currently a reserve driver for Mercedes. It's nice to know that obviously he has been able to see that, but Mick has spoken in interviews about how much it would have meant to him to be able to have conversations with his dad about Formula One and go to his dad with maybe a problem he was having with the car and things like that. So it's not been explicitly said, but it's quite clear that he's not really in a position to guide his son through it as much as maybe he would want to. And obviously it has now been 10 years since that accident, 10 years last week since the accident. So all we can do is just hope that, he's happy and he's not in pain and he's healthy and he's doing as well as he can. That's all we can really hope for, because he's an incredible man. Growing up, this sounds so silly, but growing up, because he was having the same birthday, I always used to be really sad on my birthday, because I would think about how it was his birthday and I knew that he wasn't very well. Like, I didn't really understand, because I was literally like 11 when the accident happened, so I didn't really understand, but I knew that like it was his birthday and he wouldn't be able to celebrate his birthday the way that he had been able to, if that makes sense. So that was always something that I used to think about my birthday, because I'm a little weirdo like that. But yeah, he is one of the greatest of all time, if not arguably the greatest of all time. It's kind of like weighed up between him and Sir Lewis Hamilton, because obviously Sir Lewis Hamilton also has 7 titles, arguably 8, but we'll talk about that another time. And he also still holds a lot of records in Formula One, which, considering he hasn't raced in Formula One for over a decade, and when he raced with Mercedes, he never came close to anything that he achieved in his glory years. It's pretty cool. So the records that he still currently holds are the most championship titles, which is 7, shared with Sir Lewis Hamilton, the most consecutive titles, which is 5, the most races left in the season when becoming champion, which is 6, shared with Max Verstappen. Basically, like, who's been declared world champion earliest in the season. We've got the most wins at the same Grand Prix, which is 8, and that is shared with Sir Lewis Hamilton at both the Hungarian and the British Grand Prix. The most seasons with a win, which is 15, shared with Sir Lewis Hamilton. The most consecutive seasons with a win, which is 15, shared with Sir Lewis Hamilton. The highest percentage of podium finishes in a season, which is insane. It's 100% in 2002. The 2002 F1 season, he was on the podium every race. He had the most consecutive podium finishes, which is 19 from the 2001 US Grand Prix through to the 2002 Japanese Grand Prix. He has the most fastest laps in Formula One, which is 77. He has the most fastest laps in one season of Formula One, which is 10, shared with Kimi Raikkonen. And he also has the most hat-tricks being getting the pole, win and fastest lap in each race weekend. He has 22 of those. So it's pretty cool, he really is an absolute legend of Formula One. Like, he is the legend of Formula One. And I think he's such an admirable man. I really, really do. That's why I kind of wanted to start Pitboards and Podiums talking about him, because I have so much admiration for him. I've loved him my entire life. Like, yes, he has had some controversial races. What Formula 1 driver hasn't at this point? Very few. Very, very few haven't, because of the racing mentality. And I just think he's incredible. I really think he's incredible. I've always felt an affinity with him because of our birthdays being the same, because I'm a melon like that. And I can't put into words the admiration that I have for him. I really can't. I think he's genuinely such an inspiration. So it was lovely getting to talk to you about him, and hopefully, you know, if any of you are new to the sport or don't really know the history of the sport or anything like that, hopefully that's helped you kind of learn a bit more about Michael Schumacher. Let me know if there's anybody in particular that you want me to talk about. I am going to be talking about all of this year's drivers in the next few weeks, just so that before the season starts this year, you've kind of got a brief overview of all of the drivers, so if you are new to the sport, you know who the people are. So that is something that I'm going to be doing over this next few weeks before the season starts. But yeah, if there is anybody in particular from Formula 1 in the past, or someone who maybe isn't a driver but is involved in Formula 1, like in the paddock somewhere or something like that, anyone that you want me to talk about, just let me know and I can do an episode about them. But yes, thank you very, very much for listening today. I hope you're going to have a beautiful day, evening, morning, whatever time it is you're listening to this. I hope you have a beautiful week. I hope you have a beautiful everything. And I will be back in a couple of days with another episode for you. We'll have an episode on Friday of the second episode of F1 for beginners, so do come back for that if you would like to. And then on Sunday I'm going to be talking about Sir Lewis Hamilton, because that's his birthday. How exciting, all of these Capricorn goats. But yeah, thank you very much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube, and I will see you on Wednesday. Bye!